Last episode, we set up some selection groups on our camera, based on the different materials we can observe on our camera reference. In this episode, we're going to fill those sections of our camera with base colours that are going to represent the hues and values of our camera. We're going to be painting our camera using the Mari layer system. Now, to give you a breakdown of what the layer system is, let's open our layers palette. In Mari, when we paint on our objects, that paint data is actually getting stored to the currently selected layer. So each layer contains texture data, and you can create as many layers as you want to build up your textures in Mari. As an analogy, let's say we have a blank wall in our room and we want to paint it. We might paint a base colour first, and that's going to be the layer at the bottom of our layer stack. Then we might paint another layer to build up the colours. Each layer we paint onto gets added to our layer stack, and the colour and texture data gets layered on top of one another on the object. Inside our layers palette, you can see all the layers that belong to our currently selected channel. Right now we have one layer called Base that belongs to our base colour channel, which we selected during our project setup. I know this because if we look at our help text, you can see current layer path states our object, followed by our currently selected channel, which is our base colour channel, followed by our currently selected layer. Layers are actually completely dependent on channels. A layer always has to belong to a channel. So in our case, our layers here belong to our base colour channel, which is plugged into the base colour input of our principled BRDF shader. This shader input displays the surface colours on our object in the viewport, so all of our surface colours should be painted into layers in the base colour channel. In order to get a quick colour fill on our object, we'll be making use of procedural layers. A procedural layer automatically generates texture data, so instead of manually painting certain aspects of our textures, we can actually let Mari generate colours and paint data on our behalf. For example, here's a cloud procedural which draws cloud-like textures and has a couple of slider controls for you to control its appearance. The colour fill we're about to do is going to allow us to choose a colour for the entire object, and then we can go in afterwards and paint details onto the smaller parts of the object, such as the lens ring, which require different colours. To add a procedural colour fill layer, make sure your layers palette is open, and click the Add Procedural Layer button. In the Basic menu, click Colour. Once added, our object is going to be filled with the default colour of white, and you'll notice this colour layer in our layer stack has appeared. The highlighted icon next to it indicates that this is the layer that's currently selected, but also you'll notice it has a different icon to the base layer below it. This icon tells us that this layer is a procedural layer that we cannot paint into because all procedural layers are generated by Mari. The painting palette icon means it's a paintable layer that we can paint into. In our colour layer properties, we have the option to change the fill colour. Let's change this to something suitable for the base colour of our camera, such as the colour of the camera body. Double-click the colour field to bring up the colour picker. We want to keep the colour space as same as 8-bit data because this is the same data type that our base colour channel uses. You can actually check the depth of your current channel by opening the channels palette, selecting your channel and looking at the depth value. We can also see that the colour space of our channel is set to automatic sRGB. This is determined by the project settings, which you can access in the File menu. Our project says that any 8-bit data channels should use the sRGB colour space, which is why we may often see this automatic setting with brackets next to it. Whatever's in the brackets is being determined from our project settings. So our colour selector here is also using the same colour data as our 8-bit channel. We want to keep the colours we're working with in the same colour space so we don't get any unexpected results. Use the colour sliders here to select a colour. There is also a colour picker tool that lets you pick a colour from your Mari workspace by hovering over a pixel and clicking. It's important to note that if you're going to use the colour picker, to check this canvas drop-down and the tooltip that goes with it. If you're going to pick the colour from an image reference, you should select Pick Screen Pixels. If the image you want to pick from is a 16 or 32-bit image, you need to use the Image tab inside the Colours palette to load in an image there and select the pixel you need. I'm going to use the sliders to pick a colour that approximates what we see here on the camera body. It's a very dark grey, almost black, so I'm selecting a colour here using the colour sliders to approximate the colour I see from the reference image. We can actually change this value at any time, which is one of the great things about procedural layers. If we change our mind later about how this colour should look, we can just go into the layer and adjust the colour. As we already know, our camera is not all one colour. Some of the selection groups we created earlier have light metallic base colours, like the lens adjusters and metal pieces and screws around the camera. We can add more procedural layers to get the colours we need, but we'll also make use of masks on those procedural layers, so only the selected selection group gets filled with colour. This is a really quick way to get colour fills on selected portions of your objects. Open the Selection Groups palette and let's select the Metallic Lens group. Head back into the Layers palette and add a new colour procedural layer. Right-click the layer and select Layer Mask, Add Mask from Selection. Now that colour layer is only applied to our selection group because the unselected areas are masked off in that layer. Let's change the colour to a light metallic colour using the colour slider and click OK. Again, we can adjust this colour at a later date if we need to. Repeat the same steps with the metal parts group. Give this colour layer a slightly lighter metallic colour using the colour slider. I recommend that you always choose colours perceptively, using the sliders or picking from an image. It's never recommended that you enter values into the RGB fields, as Mari will convert these values to match the colour space in the channel we're working in. So the value you end up with will always be slightly off than what you think you've entered. Always remember to save your work every few minutes, so let's go to File, Save. Next episode, we'll take a good look at the paint buffer and begin painting details onto our camera using the projection tools. See you then!